All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started. Um, and to start us off, Esteban, you want to do your quick intro for us, please?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. We as interpreters, we would like to announce you that there is the interpretation services available. If you click in the Glovo icon in the bar, the lower bar, you'll be able to select Spanish. So you're more than welcome to sign in Spanish if that's your preferred language. Hola a todos, bienvenidos. Queremos dejarles saber de que los intérpretes queremos dejarles saber de que los servicios de interpretación en español están disponibles. Si dan clic o presionan en el icono del globo, podrán seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia, español, para la interpretación. Gracias, que estén muy bien. Thank you very much. Now, ready to be someone's interpreter.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, time to officially get started. Time for another journey into the wonderful world of accessible video gaming. So welcome to our APTAT monthly webinar. I have put the slides in the chat, but I can go ahead and put them in the chat again. There we go. Okay, so before we get started, just please feel free to put any questions you might have in the chat throughout the session. We will make sure that we have time to answer those questions at the end. But if you prefer to speak instead of type out your answers, you'll also have the opportunity to jump on the microphone. This session will be recorded and it's available through our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@APTAT. All right. And as I mentioned before, we do have live captioning available. Our Zoom, I think because I did an update today, it decided it was going to do some fun things. So instead of doing the Zoom captioning, it will be available through the Stream Text website. I've put the link in the chat. So you can just click on that. It will open up a separate window for you so you can see the captions that way. And then we also have, as we mentioned before, the Spanish language interpretation. So if you prefer Spanish, you just click on the globe. And we want to say thank you to Alabama Council on Developmental Disabilities for providing that Spanish language translation service. We're really excited to be able to do that for our webinars. Okay, and I'm actually going to pause for just a quick second on my share. Just want to switch up my display here because I'm not seeing what I need to see on my end. There we go. Okay, so who is APTAT? We are the Alabama Assistive Technology Act Program. Our job is to increase knowledge, access, and acquisition of the technology throughout the state of Alabama. We do that through several programs, including our short-term device loans, where you can borrow items for up to 30 days for free. Our reutilization program. So this is where you can take donated durable medical equipment through one of our 5 donation centers, and that is yours to have. We also provide a variety of different trainings, not just these monthly webinars, but we can do customized, specialized, whatever your needs might be. And then we also provide technical assistance as well as resources for our financial assistance. Okay. And then just the kind of the biggest question we always get is, who is this available to? Who are we about? So we are available to anybody in Alabama. So that could be individuals with disabilities, parents, caregivers, service providers, companies or organizations that are interested in assistive technology, not only to benefit their employees, but possibly their customers and consumers. We are housed under the Alabama Department of Rehab Services, but you do not have to be enrolled to utilize our services. So if you're somebody who says, I know about ADRS, I'm not enrolled, but I think I have I could benefit from assistive technology, we would love to see you and have you interact with our programming. Okay, so on to the fun stuff today. We're going to be talking about accessible video gaming. So this one's kind of fun for me. Back in my days before I got older and more job responsibilities. I don't want to say an avid video gamer, but I had my good share of World of Warcraft and PUBG and all those good times. Unfortunately, nowadays I have to stick to games that require a little less time commitment from me, or things that just kind of can take 20 minutes out of my day here and there. So, but this was a fun one to kind of dive back into some other genres of video games that I have not had a chance to play with recently. So, I'm excited to talk about this with you today. So we are going to talk about different types of video games a little bit, the accessibility features to look for when you are trying to decide, is this a good game or not, or is this going to be something that might be difficult for me to play? We're also going to look at accessibility in the gaming systems themselves. We're not going to dive into computer talk so much. We're really focusing this to the Xbox, the PlayStation 5, and the Nintendo Switch. Um, just because usually when you're playing computer games, you kind of have a lot of that accessibility kind of built in terms of, whatever. Well, actually, let me back that up. A lot of what I'm talking about regarding the games will still apply. And in terms of the game systems settings, those are going to kind of be based on your own computer, and that gets a little fussy for us to dive into. So when I talk about game systems, we're just sticking to consoles for today. We're also going to talk about some assistive technology that could be beneficial for you if you're interested in playing video games with a variety of disabilities. And then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. My screen woke up. Okay, so I'm laughing because this was a fun list to make, and it is by no means exhaustive or even comprehensive, really. But I wanted to talk about the different types of video games that are out there. And really, that's because when you talk about playing video games, it's not just about what type of disability a player might have, but it's also the types of games that player might want to just play in general, the types of games that they find enjoyable. So it's never a one size fits all. And plus, too, when you're looking at video games, we have expanded so much over the years in terms of the types of games that are available, that the genres have mishmashed or, subgenres and things like that. So, what I wanted to do is just kind of give you some very basic ones that you will hear terminology through the other subgenres. And so that way it can kind of help hopefully make a little bit more sense if you're somebody who's never really played video games before. So the first one is platformer. So this is a player is going to move a character past obstacles in real time using various abilities. So for all you old school types, think Mario, think Sonic, right? You have the player, they jump, they run, they might have an ability that lets them scooch past somebody or a dodge, something like that. Maybe they can throw an item. But the idea is they're kind of moving across that screen, getting to an objective. Now you'll see some things nowadays with like the platformers where you're not moving across the screen horizontally. Maybe now you're going vertically up or down. The one that I always comes to mind is something like a Spelunky or something like that. The next one I want to talk about is the role-playing game or RPG. Now, this is the very basic definition of it because there are so many different types of RPG out there, and we don't have time to talk about every single one of them. But when you're looking at an RPG or a role-playing game, this is where a player interacts within the game's world as a character. Now, if you think of like old school Final Fantasy, it's that you have your one character, they move to the town, they interact with the innkeeper, they buy items, they search for treasure. When it comes to the battle screen, then they're going to do what's called turn-based. battle. And we'll go into that next. But so when you're thinking of role-playing games, think of player interacting within that world as that specific character. And then there's going to be some other layers depending on the genres. So I mentioned turn-based strategy. And so this is where play is paused as a player decides what action to take next. So again, if you're in that RPG style, I'm actually replaying the well, not replaying. Nintendo just redid Super Mario RPG for the Nintendo Switch. So I'm on my last star piece. I'm very excited, but it is a turn-based strategy in the fighting because it allows me to pause the game. Nobody's doing anything else while I select what Mario's going to do to attack the enemy. So nothing else is happening. I have all the time in the world to make those selections before something happens, before I make my decision. So next is real-time strategy. And so this is where, oh, hold on one second. Looks like we're having technical difficulties. Oh no. So next, we're going to talk about real-time strategy. So instead of play being paused, where the player has all the time in the world to make their decisions, real time is real time, meaning everybody's doing everything simultaneously. So if I'm trying to make decisions, if I'm trying to build resources or build my bases or gather resources, other players could be doing that at the same time. Or if there's other characters in the game that are going to try and attack me or do other things in the game, nothing is paused, nothing is stopped. So if you see anything that says real-time strategy, that's what's happening. There's no stoppage in the game. Nobody's pausing for you. You'll also hear a term called real-time tactics, which is a similar style of game. Instead of it being about like building resources and bases, it's more about, kind of the short-term goals. So more about like moving individual players across like a battlefield, so to speak. The next one we're going to talk about is first-person shooter. And so this is where a player would shoot enemies or targets and interacts with the world from that perspective of your avatar. So that first person. So you're not seeing the back of their head. You're not looking down from them. It's kind of if you were the person inside the screen, but you're kind of looking at through their perspective. Now there's another genre called third-person shooter, where it's still that main gameplay of shooting enemies or targets, but now you're seeing kind of the back of your avatar or the back of your character. So you're not from that first person perspective, but from that third person. There are other, like I said, there's so many different types of genres and types of games out there right now. You may hear terms like roguelike or souls-like, and those kind of fit into that RPG realm of things. But what they're talking about there is it's the type of how the player is going to interact with like the dungeons or whatever obstacles that they come into contact with. So the kind of the easiest way to describe that is if you're doing a roguelike, it might be where you have these difficult dungeons where you're trying to figure out the puzzles to get through. But if you die or if you fail, you may not lose everything. It'll start you back at the beginning. You might get to keep some of your stuff. Whereas like a Souls-like, you're back at the beginning, you're back at the beginning, all of your progress is pretty much wiped kind of thing. So those are things to know, because as you're looking at different types of games you want to play, having some of this terminology can help you make those decisions. I know for me, I'm a terrible first-person shooter. It's not that I hate them, I'm just terrible at them. And depending on how accurate that game requires me to be, may not be very fun for me to play. But if it's one where, yes, it is a first-person shooter, but I can still interact and do all the other fun things around it, so I'm okay with it, then it might still be okay for me to play. But it's always going to be one of those ones that makes me a little cautious before diving into it. I really love a good turn-based strategy because, like I said, I don't get to play as much as I would like to. So for me to try and remember a lot of, combinations or best strategies to use, things like that. To have that turn-based is nice for me because it's, a lot less stressful for me anyway. Platformers. Um, Platformers, it depends on the game and uh, how difficult it is set, or if it has any kind of difficulty levels or assists. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. I did not go into talking about, fighting games, racing games, um, tower defense games, things like that. Those, when you start looking at those, I feel by having some of this terminology can help you make some of those decisions with those other kind of standard genres that we know of. And if you feel like throwing in the chat what your favorite type of video game to play is, I would love to know. Okay. So now that we know that there's all these different types of video games, and that's really going to help you kind of start your journey down what I think would be fun to play, right? But now let's talk about what actual accessibility is built into video games nowadays. And there's actually quite a lot. So this was a fun screenshot. This is actually from The Last of Us 2. I have not had a chance to play this game. I'm really excited to kind of dive into it. But this was kind of hailed as one of the most, if not the most accessible video game that had come out recently. Their menus were exhaustive and inclusive to the hilt. So what you're seeing in this screenshot here is where they had adjusted the visibility settings. So if you've never played Last of Us or Last of Us 2, it is I would probably call it an RPG where you have that character that you are moving through the world, but it's a third-person shooter. So you're not from that first-person perspective. So, you're a person, you're moving around, interacting with this environment, etc. So, and The Last of Us, because of the themes and everything, and I'm not going to give you too much of the game because I don't want to give stuff away, but settings can be very dark, so the environments can be very dark and hard to see things, and that's part of the fun for some people because they want it to be nice and scary or difficult to see things and have to really get up close to an object to inspect it. But if you're somebody with a visual impairment, you're not really going to know anything because it could just look like one big black blur. So one of the accessibility settings that they've done here is they actually have this really nice visibility settings going on. So instead of, different colors and shading for the environment they're in, it's just this very gray toned area. But you can very clearly see, where the walls are, where there's some items in that space. Also, the characters and players are in like a colorblind mode. So instead of having to worry about reds and greens, we have red for the enemies and we have blue for the characters or the good guys or the players, however you want to call that. But instead of, again, being super detailed in all these kind of different colors that can kind of be hard for us to distinguish what's going on with the environment, they've just made them these like solid blue or solid red colors. So they're very easy to see in the screen. And then you can see down at the very, very bottom, you see this little item and it's colored yellow. It's this nice bright yellow. So this is an item that the character could interact with. So here it's just, kind of reducing all that visual clutter for somebody who has a visual impairment to help them see the screen and the items that they can interact with more clearly. Oh, we had a response here. Jenny is a first-person shooter fan and love open world RPGs. I love a good open world. Again, I don't have nearly as much time as I used to for them. So that's just one accessibility feature that you can see in video games nowadays. Things to look for is if you can adjust the text size. So if you're somebody with a visual impairment, or if you're like me and like to have my TV far enough away from my couch, but I want to be able to read the text from, the characters or from the dialogue or the subtitles. I want to be able to adjust that text size to make it easier to read. Adjustable user interface or UI. Again, if I can't see what I'm interacting with, it's very hard for me to make those decisions. Captions. What's nice is you're seeing a lot of games kind of automatically know that they need to be putting those in if they have their characters talking or if there's a narrator or anything like that going on, where they have the ability or the option for the player to see that text with captions. Colorblind mode, that was probably one of the first big ones that you would see in terms of video game accessibility, where they would be able to change certain colors to be a colorblind mode. So if you needed to be able to distinguish an item from a different type of item, if it was, by colors, then they would then turn it with a colorblind mode. A high contrast is another thing that we're seeing more of. Remappable keys. That's always a nice one, because if you're somebody, especially if you're a one-handed gamer or a gamer who can't easily hold or utilize a standard controller, I know for me, a lot of times controllers tend to be a little too big for me. So if there's a way for me to remap certain keys so I can put buttons I'm going to more commonly use in a more comfortable place for me, I always prefer that as well. Adjustable sensitivity, and that can mean a variety of things. So if you're, driving a race car, or if you're moving your character across the screen, you might be able to adjust the sensitivity in terms of how fast or how slow, or how much you push that joystick forward. Can you push it just a little bit and it goes super fast, or do you actually have to really kind of jam down on that joystick for it to say, okay, now you want to go super fast? But that could also be adjusting your camera sensitivity. So a lot of times when you're moving, especially with those first person games, you want to be able to not make yourself seasick, right? And not get dizzy. So camera sensitivity might be something too, where again, as I'm turning my character around, do I want it so they're turning really quick? And then, can kind of be a jarring experience for me. Also, adjustable game difficulty, and we'll go into that one on the next screen as well. But is there an easy mode versus a hard mode? I'm really liking some of the language that a lot of video games are incorporating now. Instead of calling it easy versus hard, they're calling it like the explorer mode, where this is more about you just wanting to know what this game is about. You're not in it to fight every single monster that's on the battlefield. So those are just a few accessibility features. I'm going to stop for a second because in case anybody has a question, I've thrown a lot of weird terminology at people. So just to see if anybody's lost or confused. Okay. So next, oh, that was a terrible picture. I'll have to replace this. I apologize, folks. I had my eyes dilated earlier today and I swapped out a picture for a very terrible fuzzy one. So I will fix that later. But next we want to talk about accessibility in design. And what I mean by that is it's not so much of just adjusting for the captions to be turned on or for me to adjust the brightness on the screen, but it's more about that they actually build it into the game to be accessible in terms of how it was designed. So the picture I have here is actually from Baldur's Gate 3. And they have what I was talking about earlier about those difficulty modes having the better descriptions than just easy, medium, and hard, or easy, normal, hard. They have what they called Explorer, Balanced, Tactician, and then there's two more you can't see. They have what's called Honored and Custom. So Explorer was the idea of, I'm not here to fight every monster. I'm really interested in moving forward with the story. Where Balanced is, yeah, I'm give me some monsters. Let me see what this is all about. Tactician is, I want to show my skill now, right? And then Honored is, I want to show my skill and you can, remove all of my items when I've died, kind of thing, just like a super, super hard, final death kind of situation. And then actually what's interesting for Baldur's Gate 3 is they have a custom mode where you can really kind of adjust certain difficulties in different aspects of the game. So some things that could be built into the game itself in terms of accessibility. Sound cues and haptics are big ones. I know Last of Us 2 also did this where they included a lot of sound cues, so people with visual impairments um, would know where they are, so to speak, right? So they're getting those sound cues. Or haptics for fighting games. There was one I remember playing a lot, and I don't know if it's still, currently, but it was the Injustice Gods Among Us fighting game. But what was cool about it was um, in that fighting game, there were certain items you could interact with as the character to then use against your opponent. But if you're somebody with a visual impairment and you can just kind of know all the different combos to use, that's great. You're just, kind of pounding out your fighting combos. But if you got close to one of those items that you could interact with, it would actually provide that haptic feedback in your controller. So it'd have like the little shake on your controller to let you know, hey, there's a the water tank is right here, so you can grab that if you want to use it. So it was just a really nice in the game. I didn't have to turn that accessibility setting on, so to speak. It was built into it. And that's really what I mean by in design, is they put it in there. I didn't have to turn it on. Story mode. So instead of, like I was mentioning before, those game difficulty levels, you're seeing more and more games do what they call story mode, which is, again, you're going to see a couple characters that maybe you have to fight. Sometimes you're not even doing that at all. You're just getting to go through and see the story, and then they're taking all like kind of the challenges out of it, so to speak. If the game is pausable, and what I mean by that is if you're in the middle of the game, can you hit pause because you need to answer the door, go take care of something? Maybe you just need to take a break. Is it going to let you pause? And better yet, can you save? And that way your progress isn't getting lost. That's one of those things, kind of quality of life things we don't think about is the game pausable? Tutorials. Most games will have some kind of built-in tutorial to kind of help you learn where your buttons are and how to do different abilities. But also I'm curious is, do they have those tutorials in a way for me to go back and visit them? Is there a way I can go back to the menu settings or something like that and say, hey, I want to go back to the tutorial. I know some games will have, especially if it has certain abilities that you need to use, they would always have like the old sage that taught them to you. You could always go back and visit them again to relearn if you needed to practice up on those. In-game reminders. So again, just reminding us what we were supposed to be doing in the first place, especially if you had to turn off the game and it's been a week or two. When you reboot it up, is there some way that it can kind of remind you where you're at in the story or what objectives you were doing? And then also assist mode. We're seeing this more and more. And Nintendo's always been pretty good about an assist mode where, especially for me, I'm terrible at platformers. So, I'm trying to think of the one I was playing the last time that it did this, but Yoshi's coming to mind. So I was playing a Yoshi game and I was doing terrible at it. I kept falling, kept falling, kept falling. And so it actually popped up at one point and said, hey, would you like the assist mode to turn on? And basically it would just give me either like an invincible Yoshi, so I wouldn't die anymore, or it actually had the option where they would just kind of carry me across to the next checkpoint. So depending on how much assistance I wanted, I could make those adjustments and then move on to the next objective. So those are things that are built into the game itself. All right. So next, I want to talk about the gaming consoles or the game systems themselves, and what you might see in those in terms of accessibility settings. And if you have a copy of the slides, and I'll put it in the chat again, the yellow where it says like Xbox accessibility highlights, that will actually take you to Xbox's page, and really kind of walk you through each of these. But I just wanted to give some highlights between the different controller or different consoles, excuse me. So a couple of things with Xbox. Their store, the Xbox store, does have accessibility tags listed in there. So, and you can dive into more of like how detailed did those go. Now, whether or not a game uses those tags when they go into the store, we don't necessarily have control on that, but it's just something, it's nice to know that that's there and something that you can look for. Another feature that they have, and you're seeing this also with the PlayStation 5, is what they call co-pilot. So instead of what used to be like cooperative play, and I'm always a big fan of like couch co-ops, they don't make nearly enough of those. I digress. Instead of it being a co-op where you have two players on the same field working together, a co-pilot is actually two controllers acting as one. So, instead of it being me and my husband playing two separate characters, I could be playing the character. He could co-pilot on his controller. And then that way, if I need some assistance with, maybe I can move, but I can't move and shoot and aim at the same time. So now with co-pilot, I can move and he can do the aiming and the shooting, or vice versa, depending on what our needs are. So co-pilot's a really interesting and exciting feature to see being added to these consoles. There's also, of course, your configure controller. So instead of where you could remap within a game your controller buttons, this just lets you do it outside of any game. So, maybe you don't like A being the A button and you prefer it to be the right trigger button, right? So instead of pressing A, I press the right trigger button. And I could just make that change forever and all times until I go back and fix it and not be reliant per game. So it's just a preference choice for you at that point. Mouse and keyboard abilities. What's nice is especially for a lot of games that are also available through PC, they would have that ability for you to use your mouse and keyboard. Now, that's not available for all games, but you are seeing more and more have that ability where if you're somebody who can't hold on to a controller, but you can use a mouse and keyboard, you might be able to play your console games through your mouse and keyboard. And then, of course, accessibility settings for the console itself. And what's nice to see is it's a pretty exhaustive list nowadays. You can change, of course, font size, backgrounds, things like that. But you're actually seeing more and more where they'll have, text to speech or reading the screen for you or reading the menus and assisting you navigation wise. So lots and lots of settings for the console itself. So that's the Xbox. And then I just have a picture, just real quick. There's a picture of the Xbox X series and the Xbox series or Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S. So the X is the big, tall black one, and then the S is the skinnier white one to the right of it. And the biggest difference really is the X will allow you to use discs. So if you don't want to just rely solely on downloading games onto your system and you want to have that external disc, then you're going to want to go with an X versus the S series. Now, the X will also, I believe, has a little bit more oomph in terms of performance power. But overall, I haven't really heard too many complaints about the S in that respect, but just something to think about. All right, PlayStation 5 accessibility highlights. I cannot stress how tall and how large this console is. I'm laughing because I set up ours for our demonstration here a couple weeks ago, and like I had heard stories of how big this console was, and we never got around to buying the PlayStation 5. We just went to the Xbox this time around. But it is a behemoth of a system. But that doesn't mean it's terrible. I'm just wanting you to know it will take up some space. Again, I do have a link to the PlayStation's website where it does go more in depth to its features. Now they do have accessibility features and settings for their consoles. They also have that accessibility tag for their games in the store. Again, it's whether or not the game developers put those on their games themselves. And then they also have that co-pilot or second controller for assistance. I think they call it something else. I don't actually think they had a cute name for it. They just called it second controller for assistance. So very similar settings to the Xbox system. I didn't see anything that was specifically highlighting like the mouse and keyboard or anything like that, but very, very similar other ways. And then next we have the Switch. So this is the system from Nintendo. And the picture I have here, if you've never seen it, so there's actually two versions of the Switch, and I just have the regular Switch here. So there's the Switch, and then there's like the Switch Lite. So the regular Switch is you have a screen. There are two Joy-Cons, and they're actually on the front of our picture here, that can be attached to the screen itself. So you could just hold it as one big gaming system. So think of like, what we used to have with the PSPs and the Game Boys and things like that, or the Nintendo DSs. Only now it's in the Switch form. But you can also detach the Joy-Cons, so you can have them in your hands like this, one in each hand, or you can put them in like this little holder, so it looks like more of like a traditional game controller. Now, if you get a Switch Lite, those Joy-Cons do not detach, and it's a little bit smaller in general, like the whole system itself is smaller. So now when you have the Switch, you can put it in that dock that you see in the back here, behind the Joy-Cons, and that will actually project to your TV. So it will act as kind of that traditional plug into a TV console if you don't want to take it around with you. So that's the Switch. Now, Switch is trickier with their accessibility features. When I tried to go to Nintendo's website, they really didn't have anything specific regarding accessibility. Kind of they're one of those where they go, it's accessible to everybody, meaning kind of that generic accessible term that, family friendly, etc. The link I have takes you to an article that I found that does tell you about specific accessibility features that you can turn on. Now you can customize the controller layouts. So, like I said, if you prefer to hold onto your Joy-Cons, if you prefer to put them in the little holder to turn it into a controller, there's also other controllers that you can purchase. So instead of it being those Joy-Cons, that are extra peripherals that you can purchase. So it's just one solid controller in a different layout of buttons. The biggest difference with Switch versus the other two in terms of accessibility is when you go to Xbox or you go open your PlayStation 5, you will see an accessibility like menu option. There is no accessibility menu option anywhere on the Switch. But there are some things that you can adjust in the system settings. So like you can change the display colors. You can zoom in on the screen for readability as needed. So it's not necessarily that it's really making your font larger and doing a zoom in. It's kind of like a pinch and zoom that you can kind of zoom in on a particular area if you need to. They did have something that I thought was really neat, was that you could set the maximum level or volume for your headphones. So if you're somebody who uses the Switch and you plug in your headphones into the system, if you want to, minimize your hearing damage, you can kind of put a level and stop where the volume hits on that. Okay, so that was a lot of info. I hope everybody's doing okay still. Next, we want to talk about the different types of assistive technology that are available for your gamers out there. So the biggest thing, of course, is the different types of adaptive controllers. If you can't hold on to a standardized controller, what kind of options are out there? So PlayStation 5 has made one that just came out in December called the Access controller. Xbox has had the adapted controller out for quite a bit. The Switch does have one. It's not made by them. It's made by a different company, and it's called the Hori Flex. Quad Stick and there's a couple different other companies, but Quad Stick's kind of been the main competitor to say they're a good joystick mouse. So if you're somebody who really has very, very limited mobility, and maybe you already use some kind of mouth joystick like a sip and puff or like a chin mouse or something like that, you might really want to look at the Quad Stick. there's been, excellent developments over the years for that device. Um, there are also modded or custom controllers that you can get out there. Evil Controllers is one, Ben Hack. There was one I just ran into the other day and I forgot the name of it. I think I may have put it in the resources. I'll make sure it's in there, where you can get customized controllers. So if you want a one hand, essentially you're taking a standard PlayStation 5 controller, but now we're going to rearrange the buttons. So now it's going to be a one-handed controller. They also have, and I'll show it on the next screen, from Evil Controllers, they actually made more of like an arcade style. So think of the old school arcade buttons where you had a couple joysticks and just buttons on a flat surface. So that was nice to see. Also voice control. So there's actually a product called Voice Attack, which was developed to be voice control for your video games. So, and again, it's kind of one of those where depending on the game itself, you're going to have to do some programming, etc. But it does have that ability to be compatible with those games. And then eye gaze, Tobii Eye Tracker 5, they're out advertising as eye gaze for video gaming. All right, so here is just a picture of some of those controllers that I talked about. So at the top left corner, you're seeing the PlayStation controller. So this is their Axis controller. Now, what's nice about this one is you can swap out all of these different buttons, and they correspond to the different buttons on a controller. And then you'll see this little joystick at the end attached to the side of it. Now, this joystick will actually adjust in length, and you can change the type of joystick knob on there as well. And then on the PlayStation buttons, they've actually displayed all these different types of shapes. So if you have a preference to like a paddle versus maybe something with more of a swoop or a curve to it, whatever feels most comfortable to you. And then you'll see each of these labels, you can put the buttons wherever you need to. Now, they do recommend that you purchase 2 Axis controllers so you have all the functionality of essentially like one PlayStation controller, because most games don't have you using every single button, but sometimes they do. So you might need to look at doing that. Now, there are external ports for a couple of buttons, but not all of them on the Axis controller. Now, to the top right, we have the Xbox controller. So the way this one works is you'll see at the very, very back, you can't see it very well, but there's these little kind of markings. On the back side are jacks for different types of switches. So the idea with the Xbox controller is they've designed it so you can put a switch for every single button that you would have on the Xbox controller in there. You will see 2 big buttons on the screen. So they have like the A button and the B button. So if you just, want a big A button or B button, it's there. They also have the D-pad attached to it as well. Now, you do need to plug in joysticks for these though. So if you want to have, full compatibility or, full all the functions of your Xbox controller, you will need to plug in joysticks. So most people I've seen, they will have like a specialized joystick that they either have one custom already for their chair, and then they can just swap out the input, or you can buy external joysticks that like the flight sticks. The Logitech flight stick is a good one to use for that as well. All right, so now below the PlayStation, we have the Hori Flex. And this is for the Switch. So it's very similar to the Xbox one where it has all of those inputs. You'll see all the jacks down at the bottom, but it does have those main major buttons for those Joy-Cons. But you will see again, they don't have the joystick functions on there. So that's something you would have to plug in for those joysticks. And you can see that they have those inputs there for you to plug in. All right, so going across to the right, this is the quad stick. So it is a sip and puff. And then you'll see also there down below kind of the sip and puff area, you'll see a little chin button as well. So that's, again, that's a mouth mouse that you would be using. And then below that, this is that custom arcade style controller from Evil Controllers. So kind of reminds you of the good old days, right? So it's got the two joysticks and then all the buttons on that flat surface. And then they've also got some additional jacks. So if you know you need to put that switch somewhere else. Some other assistive technology, mounts and positioning. I found for a lot of people, that's kind of their biggest thing, is just to be able to find a way to hold on or access things more comfortably. They don't necessarily need new tech, they just need a better way to hold on to it. So mounting for controllers, mounting for monitors, also gaming chairs, maybe an adjustable desk, pillows and prompts. So just making sure that you're comfortable and that you can see things and that, you know, you're going to be able to play and get access. So I have a couple of options here. So this first one is the one mount from AbleNet. So it's kind of a universal mount. So it has that you mount it to a table, mount it to your chair, clamp, and then you can adjust the height of the arm and position it. And then up at the top is where you would attach your controller. One of my things that I like to do is I would just take one of those and put a flat metal plate on there, or not necessarily, it doesn't have to be metal, but just put a flat plate on there with Velcro. And then I would put Velcro on the back of a Xbox controller. And I found for a lot of people that maybe felt difficult holding on to an Xbox controller, just having it to where they could access the buttons and not have to worry about gripping onto it made play so much easier for them. So it could be as simple as just mounting that just standard controller to something easier for them to access buttons. In the middle, we have a monitor arm. So this is something that can be attached to a desk. And then as you can see, you can push that monitor and position it where it's going to be most comfortable for your gamer. I have this really nice gaming chair here, and shout outs to my husband. We have one of these in our home specifically. So I was like, hey, I know that chair. So what's really nice about this one is it does have a couple of built-in pillow prompts for you as well. So it's got this really nice neck prompt up at the top, and you can remove that pillow or position it where you need it. And then down at the bottom, it's also got another lumbar pillow that, again, you could remove or reposition where you need to. And it doesn't show it here, but actually, oops, at the bottom is almost like a footrest, but not quite. It's not long enough for that, but it will kick out so you can prop your legs up. So if you're somebody that, you know, you like to be able to put your feet up, I know he likes to really do that for longer gaming sessions for when he's at home. So this is a really nice one. So, you know, what's nice about a lot of gaming chairs is they're built for people to play for a really long time. So they're usually built for comfort to keep you there. So they usually have a lot of the nice cushy, all the good cushiness that we want in a good chair. Down at the bottom here is this adjustable laptop desk. We actually have this one in our demo center. I find it really useful for lots of things. But again, sometimes we just need a different surface or way to get access to those controllers. So with this desk, what's nice is if I have somebody that wants to use something like our switches and our adaptive controller, but we don't have a wheelchair tray for them or something like that, I can just put all of that on this tray and then it can wheel over to them, and the bottom's adjustable so it can reach around somebody's wheelchair, or if they're in a, you know, they're just like in their special gaming chair, whatever they might be in, and I can wheel that over to them and they can have that surface, that play area set up for them however they need. And then as you can see, this one actually tilts a little bit too, so I can have that different angle if I needed. And then down at the bottom, I just have this really fun zero gravity chair slash desk setup. You know, if you really want to go hardcore and all out, not only good for gaming, but also for work too. So you see here that it provides that tilt, so you're completely zero gravity. But also it has that built-in desk surface. And then this one was like the ultimate model that they had. So of course I had to show it, where it has a couple different monitors as well. So you've got like a big monitor, you can have a little monitor. So of course, if you're doing, you know, some hardcore computer gaming, you always have to have what I think the max or minimum's at least two. I know most people, you know, dream of their 3 and 4 monitors. So. And then just a couple miscellaneous things to think about. Blue light glasses, of course, are always helpful for people. And then speakers and headsets. Again, having external speakers, if you need good external speakers that maybe you can position closer to you, or just having a good headset can be beneficial too for any kind of auditory impairments, or just, maybe it's just easier for you to play and focus if you have that more direct auditory supports. So just some final thoughts. I've thrown a lot of information your way. But I want to just kind of give you some additional clues and things to think about. Read gaming reviews. That's really going to help you a lot because, again, sometimes it's not always about the access of the controller. Sometimes it's about the type of game it is, and if it's really something that you want to play, or if it's going to do what you think it's going to do. And I know I've even run into it where I've purchased a game thinking, oh, it's going to be this fun puzzle game, and oh no, it's really this, real-time strategy. A clock is ticking down and I don't have time to do what I want to do. So reading game reviews can be very beneficial because it, again, lets you know about the gameplay, lets you know what to expect in that game. But then also reading accessibility reviews, where players with disabilities talk about their experiences, what difficulties they have encountered with that game. Next thing to think about is with every type of video game, regardless of your disability, it is learning a new skill. So anytime you pick up a game for the first time, there's potential skill that you might have to learn, especially if you've never played a platformer before, right? So now you've got to learn A, where all the buttons are, and then B, how to figure out the timing and how to read the environment to know what the timing means with your jumps. So just remember, you're learning a new skill, so just be patient. And of course, lastly, it's video games, right? They're all about having fun, those opportunities for social inclusion, just to have that ability to interact with different worlds and explore and engage with those things. So if you're not having fun, kind of back up and try again and see where the fun's not being had. So ultimately, even if also with that, if somebody says, well, you're not playing it right, as long as you're having fun, I don't care how you play it. So all right, so I just wanted to give you some sites and organizations to check out. This first one is from Special Effects, their video game accessibility resources. They have a site called Game Access. They are an organization based out of the UK. They have done grants and research in terms of not only video game accessibility, but other types of assistive technology as well. So they've got some cool stuff in addition to the gaming access, but definitely check out that website. Able Gamers, I used to volunteer with them, so it's always fun to shout them out. But over the past couple of years, they have created a really cool website or a webpage called their knowledge base. And you can actually click through different prompts to find out about different types of solutions and suggestions for the different type of gamer that you are. And then also they just have good resources in general for if you want to know about where to buy certain types of assistive technology, etc. The game accessibility guidelines, I find this fascinating, maybe just because that's me. This isn't necessarily a resource of where to find games or which games are accessible, but it's one of those where I think can help you learn the language and things to look for in certain games, or maybe certain features that you want to see. And so, when you look through that webpage, just remember, it's not going to tell you which games are meeting these guidelines, but this was developed for game developers to know what does it mean to make an accessible game? What are kind of the prime levels of accessibility? What are things that we need to consider when we're building that game? The next one is caniplaythat.com. They have some video game reviews in there. Able Gamers and Game Access does too. Sorry, I didn't mention that, but they also do game reviews. But caniplaythat.com has some really good game reviews, as well as reviews on different gaming tech that has come out. And then lastly is takethis.org. They do some gaming reviews, but they're also really big in promoting mental health in video games and video game culture. So definitely give them a look as well. All right, so do we have any questions? And I will put some links for our survey and everything while we take a moment for questions here. So we do have a Survey Monkey. Let me just put that in chat really quick, and hopefully you all got a good starting spot place to be with video games. I know it's one of those where if you don't play, you don't know what to ask, you don't know what you're looking at. And if you do play, um, I know I missed a lot of stuff and I'm sorry, but I only have so much time in the day. So that is our Survey Monkey. That should take you to our feedback survey. Please give us feedback. It really does help us. It also helps our collaborators on this one, ACDD, to make sure that we're reaching out to who we need to reach out to. And it also gives you the opportunity to give us some feedback on what you want to see in the library. And as we wrap up, my last link for you today is our next session, and that will be May 21st, and it will be on community funding. So this will be a little bit of an extension of what we did about a month ago or so. We had Kevin from our team do a assistive technology funding series. So we looked at different areas of funding through state and community organizations. So this one is going to be a little bit of a backtrack talking about those community funding, but also looking at some national resources as well. So not just state-based, but we're going to pull in some national resources. So other places that you can find to help make those purchases. All right, so I will pause for a quick second and see if we have any other questions before we say goodbye.
Hey, Jessica. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Yes.
I'm Jenny Stang. I'm representing Alabama Lifespan Respite. We do have a lot of caregivers on our program who are taking care of adolescents and children. And so this information has been really wonderful. I'm looking forward to sharing it with my caregivers. But I just want to say, as an avid gamer myself and a gaming family, I have 5 children and we all game on various consoles. It's always great to see more of this information coming out, because I think sometimes parents that don't game don't really know where to start. And so I appreciate the information, and I think you did a great job, and I just wanted to take some time to let you know that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's actually really exciting to see how much gaming accessibility is out and about in the real world, so to speak, and not just within kind of our inner circles, especially with those console or with the adapted controllers out there, in GameStops and everything. It's really become, more and more ubiquitous out there. So, well, thank you, Jenny. I hope maybe we'll see running to each other online sometime. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close, and I'm just going to leave our contact information up here. Of course, you can reach us at aptat@rehab.alabama.com. You can follow us on our socials. That's LinkedIn and Facebook or YouTube, searching Accessing Potential Through Assistive Technology. So thank you, everyone.